Welcome to Double Overtime, Ultra World's professional Ultimate League podcast. We're back for episode 2. I'm Jenna Weiner. He's Sascha Vogel. It's episode 1. It's out. We did it, Sascha. Hooray. We made it. At least one down.
We did it. And now we're on episode 2. So we're doing something right, I guess.
Something right so far. People haven't canceled us yet, so hooray for that. We do want to say a huge, enormous thank you to the community. We put out our first tweet 5 days ago, Sascha? 6 days ago? You're the one who's been running the Twitter account more. So, folks, if you're interacting with our Twitter account, double OT Pod, it's probably Sascha. It may be me, but it's probably Sascha. But within less than a week, safe to say, we have over 250 followers. Somehow. We haven't released a single episode and we have over 250 followers. Actually, for real. I was checking earlier today.
I'm looking at it right now. It is 251.
I said over 250. That's over. It's still right.
You said over 250, so...
And just a huge thank you to folks at home for supporting us. I will say for me, my first ever time doing a podcast at all. I've been behind the mic doing commentary for Ulti World. I've done podcast interviews where I've been the guest. We have a guest on later this episode. Felicia Yang, executive director of the Western Ultimate League, joins us later. Great interview with Lish. Listen, check it out. I've just never done the actual, hosting a podcast thing, and just the sport has blown me away already. I can't wait for y'all to hear this episode and all of the other episodes that we have to cover, these two amazing leagues and all these amazing players and teams that we have the joy, really, to cover.
Yeah, I've never done podcasting either, and it's been fun. And I appreciate everyone that, gave me and Jenna feedback about what we can do better, and we are listening, and we're going to try to do it. So here we go. Let's start it. The one bit of feedback that we definitely have gotten that we will unfortunately not be holding to is the length of our shows, because, folks, we're about to recap 5 games. That's not right. 3 games of Ultimate, but some really good games of Ultimate this week. And then we have 7 to pick for later, which means we have 7 to review for episode 3. So if you're hoping for shorter shows, I am sorry to disappoint. But hopefully you'll enjoy listening to us all the same. Just might be a little longer than you are expecting. Sascha, where should we start? How about we start with the game that you were at? You were in Nashville for the game between the Nightshade and Indy Red. Host did not take it down. Indy won 16-14. Close game. Tell us about it. What was it like being on the ground in Nashville for this game? It was very cool. It was my very first PUL game that I've seen, and it was a great experience. Got to go because Jackie Lai, one of the assistant coaches for Indy, just kind of messaged me and said, "Hey, do you want to come to one of our games and commentate?" And I said, "Sure." And the one that coincided with my schedule was this Nashville game, and so Jackie got with Nashville, and Nashville was like, "Yeah, that's fine. Let's do it." And so I went, and it was great. It was a really great game. A lot of fun, a lot of star power. And yeah, I guess, let's see. Oh, I got this really sweet Nightshade jersey. You can see it on YouTube, so go check it out on YouTube.
What number is that you're wearing? Whose jersey is it?
This is number 30. I don't know. It actually, on the back, it just says Nightshade. So it was just a generic jersey.
Shout out number 30 on Nightshade.
This is not the jersey that for this year. This was an old one, but I liked it, so I got it. So the game started out all Nightshade. It started out 4-0 Nightshade.
Wow. Just
right off the bat. And I was like, oof, this is going to be tough for, Indy the Nightshade's playing really, really well. And then all of a sudden there was a 4-0 run by Indy. And so we're tied 4s. And, that kind of just kept going throughout the game. There wasn't like no one had more than a 2-lead score the rest of the game. It just went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth.
I mean, that's gotta be fun to commentate. I know for me, it's like the blowouts are the ones that are toughest to commentate. Close games, you have all sorts of things to talk about because you're constantly being like, oh, let's see if this team's comes back into the game, and then you're saying that the other way, like 3 points later. I mean, it must have been a joy to be there. How was the weather down in Nashville? I know it's been like really on the total other side of the country where I'm at. It's been like really warm, and then it was like raining over the weekend. How was it down in Nashville?
Nashville is a little chilly. I think the high for the day was like 58 or something like that. So it was a little chilly for me, just kind of sitting there in the stands, not being active. There was a little bit of wind, and so the wind did play a factor into the game a little bit. Where Nashville Stadium is in a bowl, so it's at a high school. Maybe it's an academy. It's called Harpeth School. I think it's a private school. But yeah, the stadium is in a bowl. And so the wind in the bowl is just all over the place. And so that did play a factor into the game. There's a lot of, drops because the disc was, coming to the hand, but then all of a sudden it lifted up or lifted down. And so, yeah, with the wind and a little cold, it wasn't bad, but it wasn't the most ideal weather ever for Ultimate
fair enough.
that I've played in.
Yeah, I mean, it's always tough when you're commentating because, yeah, as you said, you're not moving around. You're watching everyone else out on the field sweat and be moving, and you're just having to sit and be like, oh, yeah, really great movement. Athletic plays, just sort of like shivering in your jacket. I know that this game, we should be able to hear you on tape delay. Is that correct?
That is correct. I'm not sure if it will be on the PUL YouTube channel or if it will be on the Nightshade YouTube channel, but one of them will have it.
I'm excited to listen in and watch that game. And the other PUL game, another close one between the Raleigh Radiants and DC Shadow. It also looked pretty chilly out there. So totally understand that the conditions were similar from Raleigh and in Nashville. Before we move to that one, before I pivot us totally away, Sascha, anything else you want to share from the weekend, from your time in Nashville? I'm sure you got a chance to meet some different people that you've maybe interacted with or known on social media, but hadn't got a chance to actually see in person.
Yeah. I got to meet Jesse Schaffner, which was an incredible experience. Funny story. So after the game, we were all just kind of hanging out in the stadium, and I was, waiting to talk to Jesse Schaffner because who doesn't want to? And
pretty cool.
Yeah. After she was done talking to someone, I walked up and I said, "Hi, I'm Sascha." And she looks at me and goes, "I know." I was like, what?
Welcome to Ultimate Celebrity Dumb.
Sascha. I was like, no, I don't think this is how it works. I'm supposed to know who you are. You're not supposed to know who I am.
So I have a very similar story, funny enough. And I promise folks we will get to actually talking about the other games that happened this weekend. My first time covering any tournament for Ulti World was 2018 Club Nationals. This was the first year it was in San Diego. It was an easy enough trip for me to fly down to San Diego. And I had plans to be there as a spectator anyway. And then it reached out to Ulti World folks being like, "Hey, I'm going to be there anyway. Do y'all need help at all?" And they're like, "Yeah, I mean, you've played in the mixed division. Come be a mixed division reporter." I was like, "Sure, okay." So I show up. I basically get there, drop my bags at the streaming tent, and then go to the fields to start live tweeting. And one of the games, it wasn't the first round, but it was one of the later pool play rounds, was Mixtape versus Space Heater, which was the marquee matchup that year. And I was on the sideline looking for Jenny Faye and Sandy Jorgensen and Georgia Bosher, because those were some of the big players that I had never met, but kind of, knew who they were. for Space Heater, because they're all playing in 22 for Space Heater. While I'm on the sideline, someone comes up to me and basically like taps me on the shoulder and is like, "Hey, Jenna, right? It's Jenny Faye." Similar, Jenny Faye introduced herself to me when I thought I was going to introduce myself to Jenny Faye. Sounds like you had a very similar situation with Jesse Schaffner, which I totally understand. welcome to minor celebritydom somehow in the tiny Ultimate community that we exist in. This is a very strange thing to be known without knowing people.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it blew my mind. But yeah, also with the game, Jessie obviously played really well. She, racked up her assists and goals along with one of her teammates, Rachel Kramer, who played for Boston Brute Squad for a while and Tufts University, was on a U24 national team. That 1-2 punch for Nashville is pretty dangerous, and they combined for probably seven of the 14 goals that Nashville. Yeah, like either, Jessie throwing to Rachel or Rachel throwing to Jessie. They work well together. And the rest of the Nashville team looked great. Grace Castro did great things, and I know I'm missing names. I'm not but yeah, they're a great team. Indy Red, obviously a great team as well. Shani Rosenthal was doing a lot of what she does, which is being good at Frisbee.
Helps to be good at Frisbee when you're a professional Frisbee player. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Well, glad you got to be there. Glad you got to meet Jessie. Always helps to have a podcast host on the ground for the game. Okay. I was like previewing the Raleigh DC game. Let's talk about it. There's so much to talk about. Y'all, if you have not watched this, it's on the PUL YouTube page. It deserves a watch. It is one of the better Ultimate games I have seen, and I have watched a lot of Ultimate games. Back and forth, runs both ways. DC establishing a late lead, 15-13, before Raleigh takes a 4-0 run to take it to 17-15 before DC gets a quick consolation. You think they maybe get a chance, and then the Radiants are able to run out the clock. It was just... And the names. Y'all, I was watching this game and taking notes, and I was like, the number of names and people I could shout out is just immense. 4 players who were named to the World Games team, either on the team or as alternates, which is still like 20 best players in the country. 4 of them were in this game. Carolyn Normile, Cami Groom, Clara Trope, and why am I suddenly blanking? That's how my brain goes sometimes. I am so sorry, Sarah Mexstroth. I was clicking through the DC roster. Sarah Mexstroth as well. Just y'all also shout out Ashley Book, trans representation, balling out, huge layout grab at one point for DC. Sascha, what'd you think?
That was a game. It was a lot of fun to watch, and as you may have seen on the Twitter, there's a lot of highlights, and I still have like 4 or 5 videos on my phone that I recorded that I didn't even put on the Twitter that could have been there. Like it's Erica Bacon had this really sweet layout catch in the end zone, and like it was great. Claire Trop looked incredible. Like her cutting was next level in this game. Like you couldn't stop her when she was cutting. You just couldn't stop her. It was incredible. Just
incredible across the board too. I think the young talent on both teams, that obviously, okay, unsurprising for Radiance given the UNC Pleiades program, and Tyler Smith, just like on Pleiades, was center handling. just like she's done for Phoenix. And it's just the same thing with the Radiants. Dawn Colton balling out on defense, Bridget Meisner roasting people up the line. It was just that same thing. It's the same UNC group we've seen. And for the DC side, I honestly, I feel like I should have expected this, but I didn't. Annalise Peters, center handling. Like, of course, she is some of the best throws in the game of anyone. We've seen it with Pitt. We continue to see it with Pitt. We've now see it on the pro field for Shadow as well. But like, these are players who just recently played at the 2021 Fall National Championships, both Smith and Peters, playing key roles for their teams at college nationals, center handling for their pro teams. It's just, those two teams are going to be so scary. They already are so scary. Raleigh already has 2 wins in the book. Like, please, can we get this at championship weekend? Please, can it set up so that this is the final? Because that would be, I want to see this again. I want to see this so many times again.
Yeah, it was incredible game to watch. Carolyn Normal's one of my favorite players to watch ever, and she did so much in this game as well and was great. Also, shout out to the commentators, like Player Pierce and Eric Taylor did a really good job, I think, talking about all of the players and being able to, give insight on all of them and like the strategies and stuff. So yeah, I like that. Help my watching a lot too.
It was great commentary, and as again someone who's been in the commentary booth before, I really appreciated again the intentionality, and also they were getting folks' pronouns correct and making sure that they were trying to be very thoughtful about that. They even, when like power was going out on the back end, were like, sorry, that happened, and then like recapped the last point that you would have missed when the power went out. And it's just top-notch commentating, top-notch broadcast all around given the situation, which, Sascha, this is sort of an interesting thought for me, and I know it's a long-standing conversation in Ultimate community. What do people prefer? Games happening on a field where you can surround the field with spectators alongside the players, or in a stadium setting? Because with the Raleigh DC game, it was on a like Durham City Parks and Rec field where spectators were just sitting in chairs, bundled up in blankets, sitting on the turf, versus what we've seen from a lot of the Western Ultimate League games, a lot of intention of we're going to put these in high school stadiums. We're going to put these in places where there are bleachers and stands. And I know there's split opinion on, do you want spectators ringing the field or do you want them in the stands like a lot of other sports, like, say, football or soccer, American football and American soccer, to be clear. Any thoughts on sort of one or the other? Do you have a preference?
I enjoy having the fans like right next to the field. So I've played one game in the AUDL, like I've said, in a stadium, and like that was great and it was fun, but you don't really feel the crowd energy the same as if you're on a field with the crowd, 10 feet from you and, watching you from there. So like as a player, I love being, having the crowd surround the field. As a spectator, I enjoy being up in the stands because I can see what is happening better. If that makes any sense at all.
I think those are both very, very fair. I think too, one of the things with Ultimate is that it simply doesn't at the moment draw enough of an audience to really fill up a stadium, even a high school stadium. I mean, we see this at the highest levels at college nationals and club nationals. I'm thinking club nationals in particular down, it's been at Mira Mesa High School down in the San Diego area. You can get, most of one side filled and maybe part of another side, but it's not usually a packed stadium. And it's usually enough different like players and teams that it's kind of disparate, versus if you have a situation like the Radiant Shadow game, you got, parents and fans who are filling a much smaller area. And so it feels like there's more support there, even if the numbers aren't quite the same. I think I'm probably more stadium than lining the field. Maybe that's because I haven't been in too many of those situations as a player / any of those situations really as a player where I've had players lining the field, and that kind of old school ultimate spectating experience or playing experience with those spectators. And I also think just as the sport grows, I think it'll become more difficult for you to have fans so close, just because you cannot have as many people to be able to watch as well versus, say, a stadium where, again, you have a better view, people are layered, and so no one is blocking any one person's view. It's sort of like, I don't know, old school versus new school. I think they both have their merits, as you said, but it was interesting to sort of watch both live streamed game this weekend, both the Western Ultimate League game and the Premier Ultimate League game that were available on YouTube, and to sort of feel the contrast a little bit between those two different settings.
Yeah. And, to talk about the, being close, I also played just one game with like a large crowd of, a few hundred people close. And it was a showcase game my last year at BYU. And I probably played one of the best games of my life. Like it felt great. So yeah, that's my thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a long-standing debate, and there's a reason why it's a long-standing debate. And I think it'll be interesting to see, because as you mentioned, the Nashville Indie game was more in that stadium setting versus the Raleigh DC one was in more the park setting. Do leagues like one or the other? Do they prioritize it? Is it just about cost? Is it just really hard to find a stadium in the Raleigh-Durham area? And so getting a Parks and Rec field is much easier. I don't know. So I think it kind of depends.
Yeah, for sure. Well, speaking of stadiums, we're going to go to the West Coast, to the stadium in LA, where LA and Utah, Los Angeles Astra and Utah Wild, played in their game this weekend, with LA coming out on top 11-7. Thoughts on the game, Jenna?
Rather low scoring, obviously. And that was because if you got a chance to watch the game, if you haven't, again, encourage you to go watch it. It was very windy. We had a chance earlier to talk to, again, as mentioned, Felicia Yang, who not only is the executive director of the Western Ultimate League, but also a player on LA Astra, who was at the game, played in the game. You'll hear the full extent of that interview, but to hear her say it, the wind changed between when they warmed up and when they took the field, and it was very windy conditions. And I'll let her put the challenge out to folks who want to judge the quality of Ultimate, which for me, I'm always like, look, I play in windy conditions. I know how hard it is. I am always impressed when there's clean offense at all, which in particular, fourth quarter, Astra go on a run, go from 6-6 after 3 quarters to a 9-6 lead, I think it was at that point. And I was just impressed that they were able to roll off that many points in a row at all in the wind. So I thought it was good. And, as we'll get to in just a little bit, we both picked Utah. We should have stuck with the home team. Home team continues to have a single loss on the season when Arizona was playing 3 straight games, and their only loss is to the undefeated Seattle Tempest. So, maybe we should have stuck with the home team in that case.
Maybe we should have stuck with the home team, but I love my Utah Wild team, and I can't do that to them, Jenna.
No, that's fair. And I mean, right, and also I think maybe post Winter Cup and after LA had lost their first 2 games on the road at Oregon, at Seattle, maybe we're underrating them. I mean, they have some really good players. I want to shout out personally Maggie O'Connor, friend of mine from when she was up in the Bay. Fantastic player all around. Also other players putting up numbers. Stephanie Pritchard with 3 goals, Connie Wang with 3 assists, and Audrey Brown with one of the friggin' plays of the season so far. And of course you have Dina Lemelik, who it was a baller who's always racked up so many blocks simply by reading the disc better in the wind than some of the other players.
Yeah. The wind is obviously a very huge factor. But we can't really talk about this game without talking about the wild conditions from before the game even started to the day before. Or was it the day of? No, it was the day of. It was day of. So wild happenings with the Wild and JetBlue canceling 9 players' flights.
You hate to see it. And that's something that we're a small sport, all things considered. Players still fly commercial. You're subject to the whims of the airlines. We can't charter private planes. I mean, if you know the history of women's sports, neither can the WNBA.
Unless you're the Dallas Roughnecks.
Unless you're the Dallas Roughnecks, but that's a different situation that we don't need to get into, because this is not an AUDL podcast. This is the Western Ultimate League, Premier Ultimate League podcast. But it's so unfortunate. And again, we got the chance to talk to Felicia about the situation, gave a lot of great insight on to what happened behind the scenes, how they managed to help the league itself, because it was Utah Wild players, but even Felicia, who was having 2 different hats on as both a Astra player and league executive director, helped ensure that 8 of the 9 players who had their flights canceled were able to eventually make it to LA, although the return flights were also canceled and some had to drive back, and it was a whole thing. So again, you will hear this, much appreciation to all of the folks involved, being flexible, being thoughtful. The game happened. The game could very well not have happened because players had their flights canceled at the last minute. It happened on time. It was entertaining in spite of the wind. And in my book, that's a win.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's definitely a tough situation, having 8 of the 9 players be able to go. Unfortunately, Kira Harushnikova was not able to go. And, team definitely missed her. And we all missed her. We all really wanted to see Kira play, but we're just going to have to wait until Wild Weekend, and then we can see her play.
We're getting there.
And we are getting there. We're close. Yeah, it's great to see that everybody was able, that the game was able to happen, because like you said, it very possibly could not have happened.
Yeah. And I mean, so far, right? All the games happened in the Western Ultimate League's very first regular season. That's a win. Again, you'll hear more from Felicia later about that situation, about how she's the executive director, has felt the season has gone so far. Please do stick around for that. But before we get there, we have a few notes to touch on. We want to actually still keep an eye on the Western Ultimate League Fan Fantasy Contest, even though Sascha, sorry, no win for you this week. Maybe a little too much reliance on those Utah players. It's tough. One game. It's really, really tough. And
it was a rough one, Jenna. I don't want to talk about it.
Fair enough. But someone who's actually been doing rather well and got a first win for the Fan Fantasy in the Western Ultimate League is Ellen Rim, who I think has been involved in a number of different Ultimate scenes, I think including the Bay Area at one point or another. So shout out Ellen Rim for winning this week and for leading the standings so far. We got 3 weeks left in the Western Ultimate League season. A quick standings check-in. We will be doing this for the Premier Ultimate League. However, when only 6 teams maybe have played and the Radiants have played twice, standings feel weird to do for the PUL right now. So we're going to stick to the Western Ultimate League with 3 weeks left. Seattle, top still. 3-0? 4-0 now? 3-0. Topping the standings so far. And then we have now the result between the Wild and Astra puts them both at 1-2. Falcons sitting at 1-3 still. Arizona, San Diego, both at 500. Onyx 2-1. Our picks still looking pretty solid. It will be very interesting to see this upcoming weekend in San Diego. LA, San Diego, Arizona, all playing. We'll give our picks for those games later in the show. Probably go a long way to determining who will finish in those top 4 spots, and who will make it to championship weekend, which will be back down in San Diego. I think middle of May.
Yeah, I think it's also important to note that this is the Sidewinders' last weekend of games.
That's true.
This is their last 2 games before a possible championship weekend appearance.
Yeah, so interestingly, of all of the teams that have played games so far, the Sidewinders will be done with the Wild only having played half of their games so far. So a little bit of an uneven schedule, but you'd expect that from a situation where you have this sort of tournament format where you have teams not playing quite even schedules quite yet in terms of when the games happen, all the teams trying to at least get some crossover play with each other. So you appreciate seeing that at least for each of the teams. Should we review our picks from last week? It's our last bit of business from the previous week.
I don't want to, but we have to.
We should. We did not do so hot week 1, which maybe doesn't bode well for our picks that we're going to make later in the show. But we'll see. We went 1-2. We should pick the home team in the Western Ultimate League. Home teams continued to dominate in the Western Ultimate League. And we also both went for Nashville. Indy taking the win instead. Sascha, how do you feel about our picks?
I feel bad.
That's fair. That's a reasonable response. I think we did all right. I think we probably should have stuck with the home teams in the Western Ultimate League at least. But it should be fun. We have 7 games coming up this week that you're going to hear our picks for. We're going to see how they go. Then we'll have, 10 games under our belt in picks. We'll see how we do after next week.
Yep. All right. And I think it's is it time for our interview?
Time for our interview. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we will be talking with Western Ultimate League Executive Director Felicia Yang. Don't go away. It is a great interview. Really encourage you stay and listen. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Double Overtime, Ultra Professional Ultimate League podcast. We are now here with Western Ultimate League Executive Director Felicia Yang. Felicia, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
So you are both Executive Director of the Western Ultimate League as well as a player on the Los Angeles Astra. Astra playing its first ever, I would say, real home game for the Western Ultimate League just this past weekend. Got a win in the wind against the Utah Wild. How was that? How was it being on the field with a home crowd playing for the Astra?
It was so much fun. The wind, less fun, but the whole environment, playing in a stadium setting, there's really nothing like it. And seeing all of our friends, all of our home crowd come out, finally seeing this dream come to life and be fulfilled after, initially thinking we were going to start up in 2020. It was just amazing to finally have that experience.
Very nice. All right. Can you tell us about the LA Ultimate community and how is it and how is the community showing up for the Astra?
Yeah, the community's been amazing to us. We had a guest bartending night on Thursday to get everyone excited for the event, and we had a huge turnout at our game as well on Saturday. So one of the things I'm most excited about for Astra is we have all the top women in LA playing together on one team for once. historically it's been pretty fractured in the club scene with people splitting between women's and mixed divisions and also splitting between playing in LA and San Diego. So having this opportunity to get all of these players together on one team and have a new sort of camaraderie amongst all the players in LA, and then also seeing how all of the community is coming out and being so supportive at so many different levels is really incredible. And it's something that's been a long time coming. And I'm glad the community is showing up for us in this way.
That's very nice. So like, I guess follow-up question would be, is there plans of creating a club team that kind of like incorporates like all the women that are on this Astra team as well?
It doesn't seem like it right now.
Okay.
It seems like it'll kind of still go back to the way things have kind of been for club. There is talk of a new women's club team in San Diego called Flipside, which I hear will be very exciting and fun to look at. Like they should be shaking some things up in the division. Um, but there's not a direct plan right now. Maybe one day in the future, there have been people who have been interested in something like that, but currently not in the plans.
Gotcha.
Yeah, thanks for the update. And quick thing, before we go any further, I just need to ask, because I feel like this is something I'm constantly finding myself, whether I'm on the podcast or in the commentary booth, how to say the different team names. And I say that is it Astra or is it the Astra? It's LA Astra.
Yeah.
Is it the LA Astra?
We have not been using the. We are just Astra.
Okay.
Play on Astra. We're going to the Astra game. Singular usually as well.
Okay. Good to know.
Because like in Spanish, it would be La Astra, the Astra. Interesting. Okay, cool. Astra. Got it.
Thanks for the clarification. And
Yeah.
obviously for you, and I will say, you go by Lish. I will be using Lish because that's how I refer to you usually as in the time that we've worked together. For folks at home who don't know, I at one point in time served on the Western Ultimate League Board of Directors. So Lish and I have worked together in a number of different capacities. You've been working on this league, on this project, this dream for a long time since, 2019 was when the sort of West Coast Showcase games happened. Obviously, planning had to happen before that. And you've been involved every step of the way. How's it feel to finally be on the field and be in the position where this league is feeling like it's really moving forward about 2/3 of the way through the first season? It's very exciting. I'm sure it must be for you more than anyone.
Yeah, it's very surreal. So I was one of the people who first spearheaded that 2019 Showcase series. And at that point, I didn't plan to start a league. I didn't plan to be the executive director, to be, overseeing all of these things. All I wanted to do was kind of test the waters and see what the interest was like for a women's pro team in LA. So to have it come this far and to see so much growth in so many different cities and communities, seeing how the league is coming together for its very first season, seeing how many fans and supporters we have across the country, again, just so surreal. And I never could have imagined that we'd be in this spot at this point. And it just goes to show that any little step can go a long way.
Yeah, there's always been a lot of little steps to make this season happen. What has gone well, do you think? Or just how has the season gone overall? It's been obviously a couple of minor hiccups here or there when it comes to maybe some of the broadcasts. Obviously, the travel with Utah Wild this past weekend. But how's the season gone overall for the league as a whole?
It's been amazing. Every game's happened. I think one of our challenges is other leagues who have been there before us. Like we're starting in year one. Like that's the big thing people need to remember here is we don't have 10 years under our belts. And having said that, I think we're still coming out firing. I think we have an amazing product. I think despite some things not being perfect, remembering that every team is hosting home games pretty much for the first time. And we are having all of the games available, either streamed or tape delayed online for free, able to watch, able to have these players on the pedestal in that stage that we want to show off our players. So I'm really proud of how all of that is going. All of the games have happened, which is not a given. And like I said, we're we're providing the opportunity and the visibility that we set out to do.
Yeah, I love it. I love what you all have done with the league, and it's great. It's especially in your first year. I'm very, very impressed with it, Felicia.
Thank you so much.
So I guess we're talk about more about the Astra real quick. Do you think that LA is going to make it to championship weekend?
I do. I believe in my team. I think we're on an upward trend here. We had a bit of a rough start in that first weekend, even though we were so close in that Oregon game. But I think it's all up from here. I'm super excited, and I think this team's only going to get better and stronger as the season goes on.
Yeah, I mean that you don't look bad, if that makes sense. you look great. Yeah, you look great.
Yeah,
You have a lot of great players in your team that are really fun to watch, and
definitely. And disclaimer for, I mean, we've talked about the wind. It was so bad, and it changed between warm-ups. So there was wind during warm-ups. We all, learned how to throw in that, all adjusted, and then the game started, and it was completely different. So we do all know how to play. We're all very good players. Please remember that. Would love to see everyone else throw on that field during that time.
It was. I was going to say, it was a very evident how much wind there was, and having played in my fair share of wind over the years, I am always very impressed when I see clean offense at all happening on windy fields, and I thought both teams brought, I mean, especially the run that y'all made at the start of the fourth quarter to really break it open was particularly impressive to me.
Yeah. Our D-line carried us in that fourth quarter.
Hey, D-line's strong. I'm a D-line player myself, so I appreciate that.
Let's go.
D-line pod. Here we are.
My bad.
Yeah, it's so talking about the sort of interesting dynamic you have as being both executive director and a player on the team. What's sort of the relationship between the league and the teams? Because I know for a lot of folks, and we've seen this come up some with the Western Ultimate League, but far more with the Premier Ultimate League, people being like, oh, this thing happened with this team or this particular player on a team. Why isn't the league itself doing something about it? Can you sort of explain to the folks at home sort of what the structure generally looks like and how things tend to operate when it comes to operating one of these leagues in terms of the relationship between the league side where you wear the executive director hat and the team side where you're a player and involved with LA specifically?
Yeah, so there's a sort of hierarchy of communication, and there's a lot of communication that goes back and forth, which I think is what is making this first season so successful for us. So on one hand, we're always flowing information up from teams to the league and addressing them at a league level, or at least discussing them so we all know what's going on and have updates on each other's operational questions or DEI issues that may come up, making sure no one is in the dark on anything that's happening. In the other direction, another thing I'm really proud of from the league is providing resources for teams. Like I said, this is most of these teams' first times hosting home games, and we want to make sure we're putting the teams in a position to be successful. So shout out Megan Rodak out of Arizona. She's been so helpful in making sure we're all set up for the broadcasts, game day operations. We have a whole resource for the teams to be able to lean on and ask questions and pretty much have a structure to ensure that those home games are going well. And so we're chatting all the time. There are multiple meetings every single week, and there's a representative from each team that's part of a committee called the League Development Committee. And that group meets every other week. And we're both flowing up and flowing down information between the teams and between the teams and the league during each of those meetings. And we talk about everything from operations, marketing, sponsorship, fundraising, social media, like all of that stuff. It's a grind, and we talk about it all the time.
So specifically, if we can talk briefly about, and you may not have absolutely all of the answers for this, let's talk about the Utah Wild travel situation. Out of the team's control, out of the league's control, JetBlue cancels flights on a number of the players from the Utah Wild trying to travel to LA to play y'all. And from what we saw on social media, at least from what I saw on social media, folks were mostly able to reschedule flights, find a way to get to LA. And I saw at least one tweet, if not a couple, that was like, with the league's help and with the team's help, we were able to make this happen. What was sort of the conversation behind the scenes as y'all were maybe, it feels too much to say crisis manage, but crisis manage the situation as it was happening?
I mean, a 6:30 wake up call from Erica, shout out, Utah League Development Committee member, telling me that 9 players had their flights canceled really does feel like a crisis the day of the game. So that's totally fair to say. Most of what we were doing was looking through other flight options. Like, what can we do to get as many players as possible there? So the league has a minimum requirement of 14 players on each team to start a game, and that's for player safety reasons, right? We're not about to trot out a team with no subs expecting a good game and a healthy or safe game. So the minimum we knew was 14. We were pulling on resources, seeing like, hey, who has miles? Who might be able to talk to JetBlue? Because the players are in a line at this point at the airport. People are on hold on the phone, don't know when we're going to be able to talk to someone. So we're working many different paths in parallel all morning, figuring out how to get players on flights to LA. So we ended up having, I think, 8 out of 9 players from Utah were able to still make it. We definitely missed Kayak, missed seeing her out there. I got to play with her in that Tempest versus the West game, and it was super fun. Um, but we had 2 Utah players fly into Long Beach, so we had some Astra players pick them up and be able to bring them up to LA for the game. Um, Everyone else was able to find one-way flights in, knowing that their return flights were about to get canceled as well. So they showed up, played the game, focused in, and then had to deal with flights home. I heard some people had to drive home as well, but we are still working out compensation and reimbursements with JetBlue. But a lot of it was just, hey, like, what can any of us do to help at this point? What can we do to make sure this game happens? What are our contingency plans? How can we work together for the good of the league and make this game happen? And we were able to do that.
Yeah, I love it. That sounds amazing. I feel I mean, I love the sense of community that the entire league has together, I guess. Like, it's not just like one team against another team. It's like we're all, doing the same thing, and we all want to play each other, and we want to have the best possible game that we can have.
Definitely. And that's something as a player I've noticed on the sideline as well. Like, there's chatter with the other team and with the other sideline during the games in a really friendly way. And it's like, hey, we're all recognizing that we're doing this amazing thing together and we're not just opponents on the field. We're all a part of the very first season of Women's Pro Ultimate in the West. So that level of camaraderie definitely carries through to the players as well.
That's great. I love it. I love it so much. Um, yeah, I seriously, like I said before, I love everything the WL is doing. I think it's amazing. Um, so I guess some shout outs from you, I guess, for key people involved in the league, like back end, like, and the key people that are on or involved with Astra, like who's the backbone, I guess, of the team of the league.
I already shouted out Megan from Arizona. She's been super helpful broadcast wise. But our entire board, so we have a volunteer board of 10 people, and Slap Manisha Daryani is the board president, as well as the Falcons coach. And she does such a great job making sure we're doing everything we need to do. Caroline Coatney is our new VP out of Portland, and also great to have her. I mean, I'm not going to shout out the entire board, but everyone's doing amazing work. And those two in particular have stepped up huge as board members. Megan is our business consultant, and she's done, again, just so much work. I can't thank her enough for all of the things she's done to make sure our product looks the way we want it to, and to make sure we're off to such a strong start. Um, Another thing to shout out is that we've had upwards of 1,500 viewers for every single game online, and that's super exciting for us. Like, being able to invest in the broadcasts, make sure they look really good, make sure our players are able to be seen by their friends and family, are able to share those links. I mean, we started that at Winter Cup, and we think it really paid off, and are happy to keep going on that and to make sure we are continuing to push our mission in that way.
I think it's all great and appreciate all of those folks. Again, as a former board member, I remember the very long hours that every single member of the board did, and I'm sure continues to put in to make things happen. I'm sure that's also the case for all of the team boards as well. Speaking of
Yeah,
the, so
I
yeah,
have one
yeah,
more
go ahead.
thing as well. The observers have been so amazing. And Gina Titcomb out of Seattle has been spearheading the Committee for Dangerous Plays. So that's something that we are doing differently than USAU, and we are tracking dangerous plays, and there is a suspension system. Um, and that's one of the things we want to make sure is that we are prioritizing player safety as well as watchability of the game. So that's what our rule set is built to do. And these observers have stepped up big time to be able to learn the new rule set pretty much on the fly. A lot of them are traveling to different games to be able to support in different cities. We're hoping to be able to inspire more people in different places to become observers and learn what that's all about because it's a really hard job. And they're very graceful about it, right? We're all learning, we're all going to make mistakes, totally fine. But they continue week after week to get better and to continue working and to make our product what it can be.
Can you share any more about that suspension system? I know that in the first weekend there was a bit of conversation about dangerous plays happening down in Arizona. It seems like it's mostly just been a kind of one off that weekend more than a continuing issue for the league. And with that USA Ultimate system, I know a lot of folks have complained that the yellow card, blue card system isn't very effective. Can you share a little bit about what y'all are doing that is different that you think is going to be more helpful than what USA Ultimate has done?
Yeah, this is all in our rule book, but there is a number of yellow cards that a player is permitted to get before they're suspended for a game. And so it's four over the course of a season, or if they get two during one game, then they are out for the rest of that game, as well as the next game. There is a petition process as well that the coaches can submit so that afterward, on film, sometimes things look different than they do in person. So there is an opportunity to go back and petition a card or to request that a new card is given, depending on what the coach thinks and what the play is and what that committee which does include some observers thinks. So what it really comes down to is if a player shows a pattern of making dangerous plays, there is that system to be able to suspend them for a game if necessary. Really hoping that we don't ever need to do that, that it's more of a preventative thing, but it does add a little more teeth to the card system. We are not tracking or counting blues, but yellows we are, and that's the basis of the way this committee is running it right now.
Thanks for the elaboration. So, if you don't have anything, I was going to ask another follow-on question. Obviously, talked about the Winter Cup. I was there in the commentary booth working with Old to World on the streams for those games, and we thought went really well overall. Certainly, I did from the booth, and obviously, y'all took inspiration from that, at least in part, in building out the schedule for this season and basically having three. I won't call them Winter Cups, but basically three Winter Cups sprinkled throughout the season. The next two coming up, the next back-to-back weekends, the first in San Diego, the next in Utah. How has that gone? How has that been received? Obviously, we'll know more after the next couple of weeks with the final two, but how'd the one in Arizona go? How has that been received? Do players and staff and folks like it? Is that going to be a model that y'all are going to use in the future potentially for future seasons, or will it be more of the classic home away model that the vast majority of other professional leagues use?
Yeah, I'll start with the future question where, because I don't have a firm answer, a lot of it's going to depend on how things go this year. But a lot of what we did was try to be creative with both resources and with personnel, right? So when we have weekends like this, we set up once in the beginning of the weekend and then are able to use that same field over the course of the weekend. It's also really fun as a player to go and be able to watch games that you're not playing in and be able to see other people who are there, be able to like really experience um, the whole event from a variety of different levels. In terms of this year, yeah, Still TBD. I think the Arizona games went really well. It was a question of whether one team playing 3 games in a row was going to be an issue, and I think Arizona handled that great. One of the big benefits of Pro to me is the 1 game per day sort of format and being able to recharge. Like you're not dead after 3 or 4 games in a day, having to, pull yourself out of bed and slog through warmups. Like yeah, you're still tired, but I think it sets teams and players up to perform at their best for every single game, even if that's 3 games in a row. What's cool too is that home teams or home fans then get to see some different teams and get to show up for a whole eventful weekend and make it a whole like the Beach Bowl, like the Wild Wild Weekend. Like it's a bigger event then than just one home game. There are obviously perks to both sides, but one of the things I really appreciate about our board and our league is the willingness to be agile and be flexible and try new things. Like that's why we're here. That's what we're here to do. We're here to change and improve on what has existed previously. We see that in the rule set as well. The pre-stall, I personally love it. The 4 second countdown allowing players aside from the thrower to move, because let's be real, we never go back to where we were right before the call happened anyway. So having that flexibility and agility, I think, is one of the key differentiators of our league.
Thanks for elaborating.
So, speaking of rules, what kind of rule changes are in your head / the board director's head for future seasons?
Oh man, this is not my area of expertise. This is definitely a slap question. But for now, I'll highlight the ones that we are doing currently because I know there's still some questions about the quarters. We are a 7 second stall count. We do that 4 second pre-stall. At the end of each quarter, it's end of possession until you get to overtime. And that's been really exciting as well. I wasn't sure how that was going to play out, but there really is this different kind of tension where you hear the horn go off, you can still play at that point. You should still play at that point, right? And it's that pressure of you can't mess up because that's your scoring opportunity. Whereas on defense, it's like you have to get a block at the end of quarter. You can't score a point at that point, but you can prevent them from scoring a point, which is still very important. Um, yeah, and I think the players are taking to it really well. I think again, being able to kind of play with things and see what's working and be flexible and then iterate on it, which again, Slap and Gina and Helen, our rules committee, are definitely the people for that job. That's another thing about this league and in the way we're structured is I don't have to do everything. There's so many other people who are good at so many different things, and being able to hand those off is so amazing.
I like it.
Anything else from you, Sascha? I think we have one kind of fun question to ask you after I have one second to final question to ask you, which is, what's the future of the league? Obviously, already expanded once this year, adding the Onyx. They've done so far, 2-1 record on the season. What does the future look like? And then if you have any other further thoughts on sort of anything we haven't talked about yet that's specific to the league that you'd like to share for the folks watching and listening at home between YouTube and the podcast.
Yeah, for the future of the league, our focus right now is bigger and better and more solid and more sustainable. So we are building our product in a way where we're dreaming big, right? And it's going to require a lot of support. It's going to require a lot more execution of the plans that we have in mind, but making sure that our product and our business plan is solid so that we can continue to provide this opportunity and we can continue to build on what we've already started in the years to come, right? What we don't want is to have 2 great years and then not be able to continue, right? And so being able to build that sustainability into our business plan and keep growing. A couple other cities have started thinking about expansion teams. Cannot tell you yet which ones they are, but what's super cool, said that face, Sascha. But what's super cool is seeing that other people are seeing what we're doing and they want to be a part of it and they want to get involved. So would highly encourage, if you all like our product, if you see something you want to help with, if you have suggestions for us, if you want to just donate and help make sure this can keep happening, please do. We would love it.
Social links and website info. Lish, do you want to share that?
WesternUltimateLeague.com. WesternUltimateLeague.com is the website. WU League. So we avoided the two L's is our handle for all of socials. And yeah, you can always DM or email WesternUltimateLeague@gmail.com or Felicia at WesternUltimateLeague.com.
Thanks so much, Sascha. I think last one's yours.
Yes. Now, Felicia, this can be a very polarizing question. It's been a lot of talk about this sort of question, and we need to hear your thoughts on it. Are there more doors or wheels in this world?
Oh my God.
There is a correct answer.
Can I just tell you this ranks very high on the list of things I don't care at all about? But I gotta go wheels.
That is correct.
I think that's the right answer.
That's the right answer.
Because more often than not, wheels have to have other wheels with them. Doors do not.
Fair point.
Some doors even have wheels. But do any wheels have doors? No. No.
All right, I think we should call the interview here. Felicia, Executive Director of the Western Ultimate League, thanks so much for joining the pod. Hope to have you back on sometime soon. Best of luck to you and the rest of Astra the rest of the season.
Thank you so much. Glad you all are here and doing this podcast.
Thanks for coming on. For episode 2, folks, we'll be take a quick break. We'll be right back to wrap our show up. Thanks again to Lish for joining us. Welcome back to Double Overtime. We just heard from Felicia Yang, the Western Ultimate League's Executive Director. Great talking with Lish about sort of the state of the league as it's been a bit over halfway through its first ever season. I know in particular I really appreciate the insights into how the league works and how they navigated such a tough situation, like having a chunk of players' flights just get canceled on them. Again, something that, as we mentioned in the interview, was out of the league and the team's control. They managed it and handled it pretty well, all things considered.
Yeah, I'm impressed. I like what Lish was talking about, how like everybody, all the entire community came together and to help out. And I think that's kind of what we're all about, I guess. It's nice to know that people have your back when you're in trouble. And yeah, I'm impressed of what the WL has been able to put out this year. And I like where they're going with it, and I can't wait to see what else is going to happen in the future. Can't wait to see, what the new teams are going to be for expansions and all of that.
It'll be interesting to see where they go. You'd think that potentially a spot like Vancouver, which obviously has a really great ultimate, seeing really close proximity to Seattle would be an obvious option. And then maybe you're looking at somewhere potentially like if the Mountain West communities really start to continue to grow, that maybe there ends up being a Boise, Idaho based team or a Missoula, Montana based team or something like that. It'll be interesting to see how they continue to grow. I think for me, everything from Lish sounded good and great. The only thing I really took any issue with was her claim that that Astra might end up making championship weekend, which you got to appreciate. Faith in your team, faith in your teammates. That's the only right answer for her in the moment. Still going to be tough for them to dig out of that 1-2 hole. Although this weekend we'll have at least a couple of chances to get some more wins on the board.
Yeah, they're playing the Sidewinders this weekend and also the Super Bloom. Super Bloom being a home game for them, so it's gonna be tough. But playing the Sidewinders in San Diego is kind of almost a home game for LA because they're still in California.
Only a couple hour drive, assuming there's no traffic, which you can never assume when it comes to LA and San Diego.
There's always traffic.
Always traffic in California. Unfortunately, as a California person, I will say that remains true. That stereotype is absolutely a thing. But again, really appreciate Felicia coming on the show. We hope to have other interviews with other folks coming for you down the line in future weeks. And just really appreciate her giving us a chance in episode 2, coming on and talking with us. So with that out of the way, let's move on to, Felicia made her pick for who's going to make championship weekend. Last week, as we already talked about, we had made picks for our games that didn't do so well. Well, let's try again this week, Sascha. We have 7 games on our docket this weekend between the 2 different leagues, 4 in the Western Ultimate League, 3 of those in San Diego, 1 of those in Seattle as the Falcons travel north to take on the undefeated Tempest. While in the PUL, Revo, represented for those of you who are watching on YouTube on the show, wearing my Valeria Cardenas jersey from, I think this is the 2019 player sponsorship program, have their one and only home game at TEP. The Milwaukee Monarchs are traveling south to face Revo at home, while Portland Rising and Austin Torch both play their first games of the season in Austin. New York Gridlock playing their first game versus DC in DC as the Shadow have their home opener. Where should we start? Should we start PUL and work our way west, as it were? Starting right. DC, New York playing at the Shadow. Who do you got, Sascha, in that game?
I really liked what I saw from this DC team against Raleigh, and so I'm going to go with DC.
I will match you on that one. DC looked very good, had a pretty good lead late in the game before Raleigh went on a run, so I'll have to go with the hometown Shadow for that game. For Portland Rising playing at Austin, at the Torch, I think I'm going to pick home cooking here again, just because there's a fair amount of travel down from Portland, Maine, although obviously with Portland, the Portland, Maine team, the Rising, a lot of players coming from a number of different places, so they won't all have to be traveling from Maine specifically. But I think between the travel and the fact that the Austin Ultimate community has been pretty cohesive, all of the players having played together with Texas Melee or Texas Showdown, I think it probably ends up going the way of the Torch.
Yeah, I agree. Honestly, I think that's a good recap. It's a very, very long way to travel, and I think that it's not great. It's not fun to travel that long and then have to play a game.
Speaking of which, TEP, the game at TEP. Revo Pro hosting their only home game. Monarchs flying down for that one. I think for me, I'm repping them. I'm going to take Revo Pro. They got one home game. They better win it. And I think they'll do it against the Monarchs.
Yeah, I know, Revo's probably going to go all out in this game there because, it is their one home game. They want to represent their country while in their country. And so I think that, Revo's going to take it out. I think it's going to be a very close game. From what we saw with Monarchs before, they're a good team. And obviously we all know Revo's a good team. So I think it's going to be close. But Revo takes it.
All right, let's move to the Western Ultimate League 3 games in San Diego. Who you got, Sascha? Which one should we start with? I think first game on the weekend is LA Astra, Felicia and her team taking on Super Bloom in San Diego.
Gotta go with the home team right now. That's, it's the first game of the day, and it's in their home stadium. Everyone's going to be really excited. I think San Diego comes out with it.
I will echo that as well. We both got burned this past weekend when we picked the away team to win it. LA doesn't have as far to travel, but San Diego blew Astra out at the Winter Cup. I don't think that game is as big of a blowout as it was at the Winter Cup, but I think San Diego still takes it over LA. To drop LA to a dangerous 1-3, having to win going forward. They won't play until Sunday. The next game is San Diego playing a back-to-back Arizona. It's the team they face next. Who you got?
I'm picking Arizona for this one. Yeah, I know. I'm not picking the home team. And
that's a call.
I know. And I think it's partially to do with it being back-to-back games. And Arizona being fresh, San Diego having to had play a game earlier in the day. And yeah, I think Arizona's gonna, just from legs, I think Arizona will take it.
Well, from our championship weekend picks last week, you had Arizona as your final team to make the championship weekend over San Diego. Well, I picked Super Bloom to make championship weekend over the Sidewinders. I got it back San Diego. They go for 2-2, back-to-back games on Saturday. I agree. I think the legs will absolutely be a factor. And also, from what we have tended to see in the Western Ultimate League, the home teams tend to have a bit of a bigger roster. Not monumentally so, but I think a touch of a bigger roster. Although I could be wrong about that, but it certainly felt that way. And I think that San Diego has the horses, has the capacity to win back-to-back games, especially if their game against LA, they can make it into a bit more like that Winter Cup game and run away with it a little bit more. We'll see, though. I mean, I think of all the games, right, this is the game that's going to decide it between us of who's going to make it. Although both teams will have more games to play, so who knows? I could be getting ahead of myself. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see.
All right. We also have another game for the West Ultimate League, not in San Diego. As mentioned, San Francisco Falcons flying up to face Seattle Tempest. I hate saying this as someone living in the Bay Area. All the things are stacked against San Francisco. You're playing away. You're playing against Seattle, who is so far undefeated on the season. It doesn't add up for me. I think Seattle takes it. Drops the Falcons to 1-4. Seattle goes 4-0. I could see it.
At this point, I can't really bet against Seattle right now, especially in their home stadium. Why would you?
It's not a good bet.
You can't. It's not. You'd lose so much money.
It's just, I mean, hey, we know that ADL is betting the Western Ultimate League, not on that train yet, but like Seattle feels like very safe money if you could bet like you can for the ADL on the Western Ultimate League. Our final game of the weekend for the Western Ultimate League, Arizona versus LA in San Diego. It is technically a home game for LA. They are the closer of the two teams, albeit still traveling 2 hours south, but you'd expect, especially having a game the day before, there'll be quite a bit of an LA rooting contingent there. Who you got?
This one's difficult for me, but let me say that it will be LA.
Interesting. Okay.
I think LA is here to play the spoiler right now, and I think they can spoil it.
So if I have it right, on the weekend in San Diego, you have San Diego beating LA, you then have Arizona beating San Diego, and then you have LA beating Arizona. So
we're going round and round and round.
All of those teams go 1-1. That would leave Arizona at 3-3, so likely to get in. That would leave San Diego. I got to double check their record to make sure I have this correct. San Diego's at 1-1. That would leave them at 2-2. Same place that the Sidewinders are at currently. Well, that would leave LA at 1-3. The same position the Falcons are currently at. Bold choices. I kind of like it. Does not necessarily bode well for your championship weekend picks if Arizona goes 1-1. It's still possible that they make it a 3-3, but I think it becomes more difficult than if they win in Southern California. But also asking them to win in Southern California against both Southern California teams feels like a stretch. I will go with Arizona because I think San Diego goes 2-0. I think Arizona goes 1-1. I think LA goes 0-2. I think based on between the Winter Cup results and how we've seen the teams play so far this season, remember, San Diego gave Seattle by far its closest game so far this season. I think that speaks to the Super Bloom's strength. But Arizona, no slouches either. I think that puts them at 3-3. And it's just a question of the potential tiebreaker, which will either be goal difference, which got to double check the goal difference. Currently sitting at -1 and -2, Sidewinders and Super Bloom respectively, so hard to say how that will shake out. But I think Super Bloom have a real chance to make a name, make a move, and put themselves in good positions to also have a head-to-head tiebreaker potentially against Arizona, if that's what it comes down to for championship weekend. So that'll do it for our picks. Let us know on Twitter, Double OT Pod. Add us. Let us know your picks. If we picked wrong again, like we did last weekend, let us know.
Flame us.
Hey, we didn't do so hot.
Do it.
Week 1. Hopefully we'll be a little bit better with 7 games, 7 shots at it, or we could go 0-7. Who knows? Sascha, want to talk us through a segment that we are calling Highlight of the Week?
Highlight of the Week. We have 2 this week. But first, we are going to talk about the highlight of the week, and that is Audrey Brown doing that absolutely ridiculous change of direction behind the back layout catch on the goal line against Utah. That was insane. I haven't seen anything like it in a long time.
It was pretty incredible. That's for sure. And so many highlights in the Shadow Radiance game, as we've already talked about. Cammy Groom in particular, at one point that was just the Cammy Groom point, and a couple of blocks, a layout grab as well. That game just full of highlights again. Already talked about it. So many amazing players, amazing names involved. And again, hopefully, maybe a championship preview, and we'll see some more plays like that. That'll do us for this week's show of Double Overtime. If you're a subscriber, stick around. We have a subscriber-only bonus segment. We are going to, and inspired by the recent WNBA draft, drafting players, drafting a team that we think would be great for the Pro League of players who are not currently playing in both the Western Ultimate League and the Premier Ultimate League. Players who may not be playing with these teams for one reason or another. We're going to do a little thought exercise and think about who all could we put together for a potential team, potential line of the players who are not currently playing this season. Again, we're on Twitter at Double OT Pod. You can reach out to me, Jenna Weiner, or him, Sascha Vogel, on Twitter as well. Thanks so much for being with us. We'll be back next week. Talk to you then.